There are home runs that win games. There are home runs that break records. Home runs that silence crowds. Home runs that get replayed on highlight shows for weeks and debated on podcasts for months and referenced in conversations for years. And then there are home runs that do something rarer than any of those things. Home runs that make the opposing dugout forget, for just one unguarded moment, that they are supposed to be on the other side. That is what happened the moment Shohei Ohtani's third home run of the night left the bat. Not the first. Not the second. The third. Because the first home run produces awe. The second produces disbelief. But the third produces something that professional athletes almost never allow themselves to show in a competitive environment. Honesty. And it was in that honest, unguarded moment, in the 3 seconds after that ball cleared the fence for the third time, that something was said in the opposing dugout. Something that nobody was supposed to hear. Something that was not meant for cameras or microphones or public consumption of any kind. Kyle Tucker heard it. Tucker, the new recruit, the player still finding his footing in a Dodgers uniform, the man standing close enough to the action that the sounds from the other dugout reached him clearly, heard exactly what was said. And when U.S. media sat down with him in the aftermath and asked him about what he had witnessed, he did not deflect. He did not give a polished, media-trained non-answer designed to protect everyone involved. He told them what he heard. And he told them what happened next. What the opposing dugout said. What scene unfolded in the moments after. And how the legend, the man who had just hit 3 home runs in a single game, responded when he found out. The word used to describe that response was ecstatic. Shohei Ohtani, a man who has been described by everyone who knows him as composed, controlled, disciplined to a degree that borders on the superhuman, was ecstatic. Today we go inside that moment. All of it. The third home run. Tucker's revelation. The unexpected remark from the opposing dugout. The scene that followed. And what it tells us about a side of Shohei Ohtani that the highlight reels have never managed to fully capture. This is not just a story about a home run. This is a story about what happens when even your opponents cannot pretend anymore. To understand the full weight of what Tucker revealed, you need to understand the atmosphere of that night, how it built, inning by inning, into something that nobody in that stadium had a framework for. The first home run arrived the way Ohtani's first home runs often arrive, with a combination of inevitability and shock that somehow manages to be both things at once. You know, watching him dig into the box, that something is possible. You know from the way he loads, the way his eyes track the pitcher, the way his entire body organizes itself around a single point of violent intention, that this at-bat is different from a normal at-bat. But knowing it is possible and watching it happen are two separate experiences. And the gap between them is where the awe lives. The ball went. The crowd responded. And the game continued. The second home run changed the atmosphere in the stadium in a way that is difficult to articulate to someone who wasn't there. Because a player hitting 2 home runs in a single game is remarkable. But the second one didn't just add to the first, it transformed what the first one meant. It recontextualized the entire night. Suddenly the first home run wasn't a highlight. It was the beginning of something. And everyone in that stadium, including the opposing dugout, felt the shift. Because here is what happens when Ohtani hits a second home run in a game. The opposing team stops thinking about the next at-bat the way they normally would. They stop thinking about matchups and counts and pitch sequences as a normal strategic exercise. They start thinking about them the way you think about a problem that might not have a solution. Not, how do we get him out? Is there a way to get him out? The third home run answered that question. There is a specific moment in the arc of a home run, after the contact, before the ball clears the fence, where time operates differently. Physics has already determined the outcome. The ball is going where it is going. The result is already written in the trajectory and the exit velocity and the launch angle. But the human beings watching have not yet processed it. They are still in the moment between knowing and accepting. For the first home run, that moment lasts a fraction of a second. For the second, it lasts a little longer, because something in the brain resists what it is seeing. For the third, for Ohtani's third home run of that night, that moment stretched out in the opposing dugout in a way that Kyle Tucker, standing close enough to witness it, would later describe as unlike anything he had seen in a baseball environment. The ball left the bat. And for 3 seconds, the opposing dugout did not react the way opposing dugouts react. They did not groan. They did not put their heads down. They did not turn away from the field or reach for their hats or do any of the things that professional baseball players do when a moment goes against them. They watched. And then one of them said something. Tucker heard it clearly. It was not shouted. It was not performed. It was the kind of thing someone says when they have forgotten, for just one moment, that there is a game being played and sides have been chosen and certain things are not supposed to be said out loud from the opposing dugout. It was honest. It was involuntary. And it was, Tucker would later tell U.S. media, the most remarkable thing he had ever heard from an opposing team in a competitive game. Kyle Tucker is not a player who seeks the spotlight. His career has been defined by consistent, professional excellence, the kind that earns respect throughout the league without necessarily generating the volume of attention that more flamboyant players attract. Which is exactly why what he said in that interview landed with the force that it did. Tucker sat down with U.S. media in the aftermath of that night and was asked, as new recruits often are, about the experience of playing alongside Ohtani. The question was routine. The kind of question that usually produces routine answers about what a privilege it is and how much you learn just from being in the same clubhouse. Tucker did not give a routine answer. He said that the moment he would carry from that night was not one of Ohtani's home runs. It was not the crowd reaction, or the dugout celebration, or the feeling of being on the winning side of a historic performance. It was what he heard from the opposing dugout after the third home run cleared the fence. He described the 3 seconds of silence first. The way the opposing players watched the ball travel. The way nobody moved. And then the remark, quiet, genuine, stripped of any competitive pretense, that came from somewhere in the middle of that dugout. The remark, as Tucker recounted it, was not a complaint. It was not frustration directed at a pitcher or a defensive alignment or a strategic decision. It was simpler than any of those things. It was the verbal expression of what every single person in that stadium was already feeling, the acknowledgement, from the people who had the most competitive reason not to acknowledge it, that what they were watching was not normal baseball. What they were watching was something they did not have a category for. Tucker said that hearing the opposing team say out loud what they were supposed to be suppressing, was the moment the full reality of what he was now part of hit him completely. He was a teammate of Shohei Ohtani. And Shohei Ohtani had just made the people trying to beat him forget to keep pretending. But Tucker did not stop at the remark. Because what happened in the moments after, the scene that unfolded as the reality of the third home run settled over both dugouts, both teams, and the entire stadium, was, if anything, more remarkable than the words themselves. The opposing dugout did not immediately snap back into competitive mode. The professional mask that athletes wear, the one that says we are focused, we are prepared, we are not impressed, did not slide back into place the way it normally does after a moment goes against them. Instead, Tucker described something that he struggled to find the right word for. A stillness. Not defeat, these were professional athletes in the middle of a game they were still competing in. Not admiration in the obvious, performative sense. Something more involuntary than either of those things. The word he finally landed on was recognition. The opposing dugout was experiencing recognition. The moment when a human being, regardless of what team they play for or what their competitive interests are, encounters something that exists outside the normal range of what they thought was possible, and their entire system pauses to process it. Tucker said that the pause lasted longer than any pause he had ever seen from a professional dugout in a live game situation. That the coaches, the players, the staff, everyone on that side of the field, were held for a moment in something that had nothing to do with strategy or competition or the score on the board. They were held by what they had just witnessed. And then the scene shifted. Because word traveled, the way word always travels in baseball environments, through the informal network of people who saw things and told people who told people, and it reached the Dodgers dugout. It reached Ohtani's teammates. And eventually, in the way these things eventually do, it reached Ohtani himself. What Tucker said next is what elevated this story from remarkable to unforgettable. Shohei Ohtani ecstatic. Hold those two words together for a moment and feel the specific weight of their combination. Because ecstatic is not a word that gets attached to Ohtani often. Composed gets attached to Ohtani. Disciplined. Focused. Relentless. Precise. These are the words that follow him through every profile, every interview, every description from teammates and opponents who have spent time around him. Ecstatic is different. Ecstatic is the word for something breaking through. For the internal state that lives beneath the composure and the discipline and the routine, the genuine, unmanaged, unfiltered human response to something that reaches past the professional exterior and touches something real. Tucker described the moment Ohtani heard what had been said in the opposing dugout. What the remark was. What the scene had looked like. The stillness. The recognition. The pause that lasted longer than any pause should last in a professional game. And he described Ohtani's face. Not the face from the highlight reels. Not the focused, locked-in expression he wears in the box. Not the composed, gracious expression he offers in post-game interviews. Something different. Something that Tucker said he had not seen in the time he had been a teammate, an expression that broke through every layer of professional control and revealed, for just a moment, the human being underneath all of it. Ohtani was ecstatic. Not because of the home runs. He has hit home runs before. He has hit 3 home runs in a game before. The physical achievement, as extraordinary as it is, was not what produced that expression on his face. What produced it was the remark from the opposing dugout. The involuntary acknowledgement from the people with the most competitive reason to suppress it. The fact that his performance had reached across the boundary of competition and produced honesty from the other side. Tucker said that Ohtani laughed. Not the polite laugh of a media appearance. A real laugh, genuine, surprised, slightly disbelieving. The laugh of someone who has worked for something for a very long time and has just received confirmation of it from the most unlikely possible source. The opposing team. In the middle of a game. Saying out loud what they were supposed to keep to themselves. For Ohtani, Tucker explained, that meant more than the home runs themselves. Because home runs are his. They come from inside his system, his preparation, his discipline. They are the product of everything he controls. But the opposing dugout's reaction, that was something he could not manufacture, could not prepare for, could not produce through any amount of discipline or routine. That was real. And real, Tucker said, was what made Ohtani ecstatic. Kyle Tucker came to the Dodgers as a new recruit. A player still learning the rhythms of a new organization, still building relationships, still finding his place in a clubhouse that already had its established figures and its established culture. But on the night of Ohtani's 3rd home run, Tucker witnessed something that no amount of time in a new clubhouse could have prepared him for. And when U.S. media gave him the opportunity to share it, he did, without polish, without calculation, with the straightforward honesty of someone reporting what he saw because it deserved to be reported. The remark from the opposing dugout. The scene that unfolded. The stillness that held both sides of the field in something beyond competition. And Ohtani, disciplined, composed, relentless Ohtani, laughing with the genuine, unguarded joy of someone who has just received the rarest possible gift. Validation from the people who had every reason to withhold it. 3 home runs in a single night. An opposing dugout that forgot, for 3 seconds, to keep its professional mask in place. And a new teammate close enough to hear the truth when it slipped out. This is what makes Shohei Ohtani different from every other player in baseball. Not just the home runs. Not just the numbers. Not just the preparation and the discipline and the system that produces excellence on schedule. It is the fact that his excellence reaches across the boundary of competition and produces honesty in people who came to the ballpark determined to beat him. The factory produces home runs. But sometimes, on the rarest nights, in the most unguarded moments, it produces something even more valuable than that. It produces the truth. And the truth, when it comes from the opposing dugout in the middle of a game, sounds a lot like exactly what Kyle Tucker heard.